Now let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about keeping the house instead of letting it go, because I'm sure that's why you're here. You're not here to say, let's go with the default strategy. Let's go to the good strategy first, okay? There are many, many ways of keeping your house, right? Now I'm going to talk primarily about the foreclosure defense and the bankruptcy. The other three, the modification, the refinance, and the forbearance, and especially the modification, Carolina is going to come and talk to you in great detail about that process. And we love modifications. Modifications is a great thing right now, if it's done correctly. And we've had many of our clients who've had their payments dropped dramatically as a result of the modification. So that's one of our first things we're thinking when someone comes to the foreclosure problem with us. Okay, we're going to let her talk about that. The forbearance, that essentially means that you're a little bit behind your payments. Maybe you had some temporary job loss, maybe a month or two. You got a job back again. You got income coming in. You're only 2 or 3 months behind. Maybe it's just a repayment plan. That's what the forbearance is. It's like payment and a half. You get $1,000 payments, but you're paying $1,500 a month, and you're catching up. That's kind of what the forbearance is. Versus the modification, which is actually changing the terms of the note itself, changing the interest rate, changing the duration, maybe changing the principal amount due on the note. That's what the modification is. That's the difference between those. And then there's a refinance, which I'm not going to address. Refinance is great, but most of the people that I see, it's not an option. Either because there's zero equity and way upside down, or because they're just too far behind on payments at that point. But it is an option for, again, for some people, that is an option. Okay, so I'll throw that up there just for. Well, let's talk about the real stuff. Foreclosure defense. Now, we talked before about this. You get 20 to 30 days. It's really 20 in the rules of civil procedure. But some mortgage companies will say you get 30. And so 20 to 30 days, depending on what it says in the complaint, to file an answer, a responsive pleading. Okay. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, first of all, it allows you to be in the game. You get the invitation to the dance, and if you don't RSVP, you don't get to go. Okay? Which means that you don't get to raise defenses that you do have. You don't get to participate. You don't get to receive notice. Here's my biggest fear for many, and this has happened to several of my clients. The sheriff shows up at their house with a 24-hour eviction notice. What? It turns out their house was sold a week earlier at a foreclosure sale. They never got any notice because they never filed a responsive pleading. Once you do that, you don't have to give notice. You're out of the game. Now, sometimes they'll do it anyway, but very often they won't. And so you have no idea that the motion for summary judgment is being heard. You have no idea that the sale has been scheduled, and you have no idea that the eviction notice is coming. Okay? There's nothing worse, I guarantee you, than having this 24-hour notice in a 4 or 5 bedroom house that you've been living in for 20 years. It's not doable. Okay? And if they want to be mean about it, they can bring a gang of guys over and throw your stuff out in the front yard, and they will do that. If you've ever seen, sometimes every once in a while I'll drive around and I see there's a bunch of stuff out in the front yard. I know what happened. That's what happened. Okay. Now, if you get one of those things, call the mortgage company, call the attorneys and say, please, I had no idea. I need extra time. They just as soon move you out in a nice way than have them come out, because then you're going to destroy stuff, and it's not pretty. Okay. But that's what happens if you don't file a responsive pleading. Okay. So please, even if it's one sentence, I want to pay, it's something. Okay. And then the final thing is it gives you a right to mediation. And this is something relatively new as far as foreclosure goes. Traditionally, you never had a right to mediation, but the response of the judges around the country, in Florida in particular, and in Orlando in particular, has been, we want to give people the right to at least be heard, and at least get to talk to the mortgage company, because you can't talk to them a lot of times. I do this for a living, and I can't get along. I have to go through 14 people to get to someone who can actually say something, and it's frustrating. That's saying I'm an attorney. Normally it at least gets me a phone call, but a lot of times it's not. So the mediation is the judge's response to the mortgage company not responding. And this makes them talk to you with a mediator. You have to have someone there. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But if you don't file a responsive pleading, You don't get to participate in mediation either. You get nothing. Okay? So remember that. If that complaint comes, do something with it. Okay? Next slide. Legal defenses. All right. People all the time, when I ask them, why didn't you answer the complaint? Why didn't you talk to an attorney? Why didn't you do something when that complaint came? Well, I didn't make the payments. Okay? You know, I owe the money. I get that. I know you didn't. I know you owe the money. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the right to throw you out the way that they are. Okay? There are many, many, many defenses to foreclosures. And I'm going to just throw you the big ones now, just so you can get a sense for that. I'm not trying to teach about the law. I just want you to see that there are options. Okay? Now, the biggest one, there's really two big ones that I see. What we call standing, which means that they have the right to sue you. You'd be amazed that the bank would serve you with a complaint, but you know what? They don't legally have the right to sue you. You're going to say, well, how's that? Well, I'm going to show you. All right? And the other one, this is kind of a big thing in the media right now, which I threw out there, is the lost note defense. And you probably heard about this. This is a big deal right now. And I can talk a little bit about that, but it kind of sort of goes hand in hand with the problems. But there are defenses. All right, let's go to the next slide. Hopefully you can see this. This is in your materials too. This is just a random foreclosure complaint that I pulled out of one of my clients' files when I was putting these slides together. I just grabbed one. 90%, literally, of the foreclosure complaints that I see are messed up. They're just wrong. And which means I'm calling a motion to dismiss because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Now let me tell you again, the first one, let's talk about standing. You see at the very top there, it says GMAC Mortgage. That's the plaintiff. They're the ones that are suing. And then I crossed out the defendant. I don't want to share with everybody what's going on with them. But then if you look in paragraph 2 of the complaint, it says on June 17, 2008, Orange County, so-and-so executed and delivered to Lend America a promissory note. Okay? So you're looking at it, you're thinking, all right, GMAC is suing, but Lend America is the one that they gave the promissory note to, the one that gave them the money, the one that they said that's what they're going to do. Also did the mortgage with Lend America. Okay, let's go 2 slides. Oh, this one right here, perfect. This is the mortgage. Okay, and if you look, I don't know if you can see it, in about the middle of the page, it says Lend America. That's the mortgage. Okay, it's not GMAC. It's Lend America. All right, so let's go back up 1 slide, maybe 2. Okay, it says, number 3 says, plaintiff is the owner of said note. Well, how did they become the owner of said note? And I didn't put all the documents that went along with this complaint. It's a big old thick thing like that. I don't want to show you all this stuff. I'll tell you, there's no document showing how GMAC became the owner of the note and the mortgage. It's the same as me suing you for foreclosure. You know, I go get the stuff out of the public records too and attach it to a foreclosure complaint and say, who knows that they have the right to sue you? Maybe they made it up. Maybe it's a scam. I don't know. You know, but why is this happening? And why is this happening in 90% of the cases that I see? Literally, I'm not making that up. That's how it is. You know, and as an old foreclosure attorney on the other side, this appalls me, frankly, the level of lawyering that I'm seeing right now. And it's because of the craziness of the go-go mortgageers, all right? That's what's causing this problem right now. In the old days, back when I did this, I represented SunTrust, among other people. SunTrust would do the mortgage, they'd keep the mortgage. You know, they'd hang on to the documents, you'd pay the money to SunTrust. You know, at the end of the day, you paid off SunTrust, you'd have a mortgage burning party and everything would be great. You know what? That's not what happened, though, with the craziness of the mortgageers. Instead of Lend America being mortgage company A, and instead of them keeping it, it went to B, to C, to D, to E, to F, and then it probably went to 1,000 people as a mortgage-backed security. And you've probably heard that term put around. And there's some trustee and there's 1,000 investors that own a piece of your mortgage because it was bundled and packaged. So in that trip from A to B to C to D to F to the 1,000 investors, somewhere along the way, the documents got misplaced or maybe never happened at all. Maybe there never was, and what they need to have is what's called an assignment document. That's one way of doing it, saying, I assign my rights to you, B. B says, I assign my rights to you, C. But they were moving so fast that those documents never happened very often. Same thing with the mortgage note itself. The original promissory note disappeared somewhere. Maybe generally with A, maybe with B, maybe with C, but somewhere along the way it got lost. Okay? So that's the problem. Somewhere along the way there wasn't authority given for this company to sue you. All right? Now, if it happens that A is where it stopped, let's say Lind America, and I think Lind America is out of business, as many of them are. If Lind America is out of business and they never gave the right to sue you, that's a fatal flaw to the foreclosure. No one can foreclose on this note if that's the case, ever. Now, I'll tell you, that's rare that they don't ever come up with a document, but it could happen. And you could have a quiet title action, and you could have the house free and clear. Okay? Again, very, very, very rare. So I don't want you all thinking, yeah, I'm getting the house, all right? Because it's probably not going to happen, all right? But that is an issue. Now, I'll tell you also what happens. They make them up. You see this a lot. They say, uh-oh, we got a problem. There's no assignment document. Let's make one up. They'll never know. So I file a motion to dismiss, and all of a sudden, there's an assignment document. Wow, look at that. And then it turns out that it can't be real because the notary stamp would have expired way back. You know, for instance, here, I'll give you an example. There's one that should have been dated in 2000. That was when the assignment was dated. It says the notary stamp expires in 2007. I don't know if anybody knows anything about notary laws. They're only good for 4 years. So that's not possible for them to have dated something in 2000 with a notary stamp that expired in 2007. Again, not super prevalent, but it does happen. Okay? So these are the, okay, yeah, you know what? You didn't do what you were supposed to do. You didn't make the payments, but they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Okay? So just because you feel guilty about not making the payments, don't throw your house away. All right? They may have big problems. And I'm not doing this to get somebody or to give you a free house when you probably don't deserve it because they did something wrong. I have different reasons for this, and I'll tell you about that. Let's go to the next slide. Well, let's talk about the second problem. And we talked about it a little bit, the promissory note. The promissory note doesn't make it either, right? So there's the mortgage just traveling along the track and it stops. And then there's the actual note itself. And when you do a foreclosure, you have to take that promissory note and give it to the court in exchange for your foreclosure judgment. And the reason is you're trying to get it out of the stream of commerce so no one else comes along and tries to sue you on it. So for them to get the judgment, they have to give the court the original promissory note. Back in the day, I'm representing creditors. I'm looking for the original promissory note. I'm in their safe, in the vault. Where is it? We don't know. What do you mean you don't know? How can you lose the original documents? We lost them. I think Joe came in and cleaned and, he threw them away. What? So that's a problem, but it happens. It happens all the time. In fact, it happens so much, there's a statute that says, it's a reestablishment statute, which says if the bank says, okay, look, we had it, we lost it, we don't know what happened to it, okay, and they can reestablish the terms, they can get it without the original document. They have to say that they're not going to come after you or they're not going to let anyone else come after you for it, so they can reestablish it, okay? But guess what? Part of the statute and part of what they have to swear in their complaint says they had possession of it when they lost it, or that they had the right to enforce it when they lost it. But we get back to that same issue again. What if they never had it in the first place? It stopped at A, and F is now coming after you, but they never had possession or the right to pursue it. They can't reestablish it, okay? So those are two major defenses. Now the problem is a lot of times they really do have a note, they just haven't caught up with them. So we'll file a motion to dismiss and then they find it. But that does happen. But that is, again, another defense. So let's go back to the slide before. No, we'll stay with there. Okay, so those are two major defenses to that. We will file a motion to dismiss and say, prove it. Then they'll come back and say, well, we have a right to it. And maybe I end up having to then do an answer, and I do what are called affirmative defenses, discovery, saying, okay, I want you to tell me when you lost that.
prove to me when you lost it. Now we're taking the 4-month foreclosure process and potentially making it a year, maybe longer, okay? And there are other problems. Truth in Lending Act violations. They did the wrong calculations. They didn't charge you the right way. Predatory lending, fraud. There's all kind of reasons, all kind of problems. They misallocated your funds. I see that all the time. You know, you send it to the person who's collecting your money, they send it somewhere else, and you know, then they even though you're current, they sue you for foreclosure. So there are many, many, many defenses to the foreclosure. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, okay, why? You know, I was at a seminar a few months ago. A lady stood up and she says, you know, I went to an attorney and I'd heard about this whole note thing, and I said, can you raise this as a defense? And the attorney said, that's just playing games. I'm not going to play games. I think that's malpractice. We're not playing games. We're giving you your legal rights. And more importantly, I'm trying to buy you time. That's what I'm doing. I'm not trying to give you a free house. I'm trying to buy you time. Time for your financial situation to improve. Maybe you lost your job a few months ago, but you know what? Now you're going to get your job. If I can buy you this much longer, you can start making payments again. We can get you on a modification. It's a win-win for everyone. The mortgage company has someone who's paying. They don't lose a bunch of money when the thing goes to sale. You keep your house. Sometimes it's my job to help them make good business decisions. You know? Sometimes they don't make good business decisions, and I'm helping them. I like the win-win scenario. And if that means I got to stall them for a while, I'm going to do it. Okay? So you're not playing games. You're defending your legal rights. Modification. More time for modification. Generally, and Carol Ann's going to tell you this, it normally takes at least 3 to 4 months to do a modification, if not longer, depending on the bank. You know how long I told you it takes to do the foreclosure? 4 months. So there's a problem there. You know, and they doing what I call the modification track and the litigation track at the same time. They're running like this. So even though you're working with them, a lot of times they're still moving forward with the litigation. And if the litigation side moves quicker than the modification side, you lose. You know, that's a problem. Now, sometimes they'll slow it down. Sometimes they'll stop it. Sometimes they'll cancel a sale because you're working with them. Sometimes they won't. So I'm going to buy you more time to do the modification by doing the defenses, okay? And the final thing is leverage. If they think that I think that they've got a problem with their note and their mortgage, you know what? They may be willing to do something with us. I can't tell you how many modification proposals that I've seen come back from mortgage companies that, you know, at best they're cutting $5 a month off of their payment. When I know the guidelines are they should be knocking off $500 a month from their payments. All right? So maybe sometimes I need to say, you know what, guys, I don't think that you can ever sue them. I think maybe they get the house for free. Maybe we'll find out. What do you think about that? And they're like, you know, what do you want? How are we going to fix this? All right, good, let's talk about that, okay? So leverage is a good thing. Remember I told you the start of the dance, it gives you power that you haven't had for a while. Before the foreclosure's filed, they're here and you're here. After the foreclosure is filed, it starts to even up a little bit, okay? All right, next slide. Mediation, I talked about this before. Modification is something we do a lot of, but the mediation is similar. And again, this came from the judges saying, we're tired of people not being able to get a hold of the mortgage company. You know, you call them 50 times and you can't ever speak to someone, or you get someone in India or Pakistan and they're like, you know, we don't care. You know, pay your payments. You know, we cannot help you. You know, this is the attempt by the local judiciary to say, talk to these guys. You know, let's work this out, guys. And so they've started this mediation program in most of the counties in this area. And if you file an answer, there's a mandatory mediation process where you sit down with a representative of the mortgage company who has the power and the authority to resolve this problem with you, and a mediator, a third-party neutral mediator who said, come on, guys, let's work this together, okay? Next slide. The requirements, the mortgage company has to coordinate it, so they have to set it up with a mediator. They have to pay for it. I love that one. You don't have to pay anything. You get to participate in the mediation. There is a cost for it for the mediator, and the mortgage company has to pay it. And they have to be there. They can't just phone it in. They have to be there. It has to be a representative there, okay? You have to file an answer, right? We talked about it like 1,000 times. So if nothing else, you're going to remember that today. A responsive pleading, you have to provide financial documents so that they can evaluate whether you do qualify, and if you do, on what terms, and then you have to be there as well, okay? Mediation's a great thing. Again, if you're in that process, you have to follow responsive pleading. Next slide. All right, enough of foreclosure defense. Let's talk about bankruptcy. I know, it's a bad word. It's like, oh, bankruptcy. No, I'll never consider that. Nope. My parents would roll over in their graves if they ever heard I was filing bankruptcy. Well, you know what? It's a tool, right? And sometimes it's a wonderful tool. And in the right place. Now, I'm a bankruptcy attorney, but there are many times where someone's sitting across from me, I'm like, don't file. It doesn't make sense. It's all on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it's the best thing ever for you. Sometimes it's like, nah, that's not a good plan. Let's do something else, okay? But in the right use, it's a wonderful tool. Now, as far as the mortgage context, it's either a long-term solution or a temporary solution. Now, back in the day, before all this craziness, if someone came to me and they were behind on their payments on their mortgage, I put them in Chapter 13. It allows me to repay it over a long period of time. They got to start making their payments, but then they can catch up the arrears. So if they want $20,000 in arrearage from you, or they're going to foreclose on you, we follow 13. You can take care of that. Nowadays, I kind of go towards modifications first, and then we'll talk about the bankruptcy second, and I'm going to tell you a bit about that. Chapter 7, going back, Chapter 7 is a temporary solution, and that's the difference as far as the mortgages go. The Chapter 7 is what most people file, most people think of when they think of a bankruptcy, primarily for unsecured type debt, collections, medical bills, credit cards, etc. It will stop a foreclosure sale, even on the day of foreclosure. All right, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I filed many, many bankruptcies at 10:55 in the morning. The 11 o'clock sale was occurring, and I were like, file. So it will stop it. As soon as we file it, either Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 will stop a foreclosure sale. So if you're in that point, again, the seminar is that 3 months ago. A person stood up and said, I'm going to lose my house next week. What can I do about it? The answer was, gosh, we're sorry. What? No! At least file a bankruptcy. At least call them, do something. But the bankruptcy will stop this. If you find yourself in that position, the bankruptcy will stop it, and then we can figure out what we're doing. Okay? Next slide. Chapter 13, stops the foreclosure sale even on the day of sale. It allows repayment of the arrearage over 5 years. Let's flip to the next slide. Okay, the automatic stay, that's what stops it. It's an injunction that stops any kind of collection activity, including foreclosure sales, the moment it's filed. All right? 10:55, I file it. 11 o'clock, you have the sale. Doesn't happen. Okay, so it will stop it immediately. Next slide. Flexible repayment, again, if you're $20,000 in arrearage and they only want $20,000 or nothing, we can pay that back over up to 5 years. And we can choose how to pay that back interest-free. Sometimes I do what's called a step-up plan, which is first year, I'm not going to pay any arrearage. And then as your financial situation improves, then I'll start upping the payments, okay, so that you can afford them. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. Next slide. Here's my favorite use of 13 now, and this may blow some of your minds, all right? It can allow you to strip off the second mortgage, all right? Our example again, let's go to the next slide. First mortgage balance, $200,000. Second mortgage, $50,000. Your house is worth $175,000. Now, let's say instead of doing a short sale or a deed in lieu, you say, I want to keep the house. I do. But, the payments are pretty high. I'm paying $500 a month maybe on the second mortgage, and it's going to be 10 years before I ever have equity again. So, I don't know about that. In a Chapter 13, if the mortgage balance on the first exceeds the value of the house, as it does here, the second mortgage is completely unsecured, and I can make it go away in a Chapter 13. We call it stripping it off. It's gone, okay? And so let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. And one more. This is my favorite strategy right now if there's a second mortgage. First thing someone comes in, we do a modification. Again, when I say we, you can do it too. It doesn't have to be an attorney, but we do a lot of it. It's just, we do the modification first. Why do I do that? Because instead of having to pay back $20,000 over 5 years and keep the same payment that you were having problems with anyway, if we do the modification, your payments are going to drop probably, and the arrearage goes at the end of the loan, so you don't have to pay that back either. Okay? So I fixed the first mortgage problem first, then we file the Chapter 13, and we strip off the second. So you have, your payments go from this to this, and your equity, well, the balance on your mortgage goes from this to this. Okay, so it makes more sense, it'll be sooner before you come back in. Very, very powerful technique. I haven't been able to use it for 10 years. And that was the last time that the balances on the houses had exceeded the value of the houses. So we're in a very unique period of time right now where you can take advantage of this technique. Let's go back 2 slides. One more. All right. It also addresses other debts, IRS problems, car loans. I can modify car loans in a Chapter 13, lower your interest rate, extend the duration, get your payments down, trying to help unsecured debt goes away as well. All right, next slide. Go back. All right, one more. That's it. All right, here's the big shock for most people who don't really know much about bankruptcy. It can actually improve your credit. People are like, oh no, bankruptcy is going to kill me for 7 years. I'm going to be in credit heck for 7 years. Well, it's probably not true. Because of the credit scoring models that we use now, bankruptcy almost always improves your credit and almost always dramatically within a year after filing. And that's because a good portion of your score is based on a ratio of your balances to your credit lines. Ideally, they should be under 30%. So if you have $10,000 in credit lines, you should be under 30%, so $3,000 in balances. As it gets more and more and more and closer to the $10,000, your scores start to plummet because of that, okay? Most of the clients that I see are more than 100%, 150%, because they've stopped making payments and they're backing up, and so that it's getting higher and higher. When we file the bankruptcy, it wipes out all of that junk, resets the ratios, gets rid of the late pays, so that even if, you know, you have the bankruptcy on your record that pulls the scores down, the overall net effect is it goes up. And that's the same regardless of the Chapter 13 or the Chapter 7. Many people who have settled their debts, their scores stay down lower, much lower than if people just filed a bankruptcy, which is kind of surprising to many people. All right, next slide. Next slide. All right, it's the same thing, right? You know, you can wipe out the deficiencies. We talked about that before. It'll temporarily stop the foreclosure, wipes out most unsecured debt.